Did Sony have a choice pulling the movie depicting the assassination of North Korea leader Kim Jong-un? And what can you do to protect your own cybersecurity? With me now, former National Security Agency Deputy Director Colonel Cedric Leighton and author of Nuclear North Korea, Gordon Chang. Good evening, gentlemen. Gordon, I'm going to start with you. North Korea today saying they were framed and that they want to join the U.S. investigation, and if they're not allowed to join, there will be serious consequences. Is that a joke?
It is a joke, because this is typical North Korean propaganda. You know, the president talked yesterday about what North Korea's responsibility for this, so Pyongyang had to react, and this is what they do. They come out with this overblown language. But, you know, we've got to remember that North Korea can actually do real harm to the United States, and so serious consequences, which is what they're talking about, is something we need to expect.
Cedric, North Korea saying they were framed?
Oh, that's amazing, Judge. You know, if they were framed, then I think Jack the Ripper was probably not guilty. But this is one of those situations where there are so many paths that lead to Pyongyang and their involvement that if they were framed, that's a new day in history at this point.
All right, Gordon. President Obama saying yesterday that he weighs in. He says Sony made a mistake.
Well, Sony did what any U.S. company would do these days because of the liability. Now, nobody outside of North Korea really likes what Sony did. It was craven, but they're not the ones who have responsibility for protecting American liberty. The person who has that responsibility is the president. And because of 2 decades of bad decisions in the White House, what we have is Sony being put into an impossible situation. It's not Sony's fault.
And Cedric, I'll go to you on the same thing. Look, Sony has shareholders, their board of directors, trustees. I mean, you know, when someone says there's going to be a 9/11 type attack, and so the theaters start saying we're not going to run this, was Sony right, and was the president wrong in criticizing Sony?
Well, I don't think the president was wrong in this case. I think he was right to say we really do need to stand up to the North Koreans. But when it comes to a board of directors and what corporate officers are going to do in a situation like this, Judge, they are absolutely going to take the path of least resistance and the path of safety. So their reaction is not unexpected. But you really have to steel the national resolve, and that's, I think, what the president was trying to do in this case.
Well, but Cedric, the president knew about this, and when he says, oh, I wish they talked to me, I mean, his FBI was in on this, Homeland Security was in on this, the State Department says, oh, yeah, well, they did talk. But, you know, shouldn't the president, he's a lawyer, shouldn't he know, you know, this is a criminal act, let me jump in there?
Well, I would hope so. In this particular case, you know, it's the borderline between the criminal and an offensive national security / pseudo-military type activity, and that's where the definitions of what constitutes war in cyberspace really haven't reached fruition or maturity yet, and that's the real problem. We don't really know what kind of space we're getting into here, and the institutions that we have and the laws that we have not kept pace, so that keeps everybody really on edge at this point.
And Gordon, when the president says that there'll be a response that he'll determine, what can we possibly do in a situation like this?
There's a lot of things that we can do, but we probably won't do them. For instance, we can put in place sanctions that the Bush administration imposed in 2005. When we cut the North Koreans off from the global financial system, we should enforce Security Council resolutions prohibiting the sale of ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons technology, which we don't enforce right now. And we should call out China in public, because China was complicit in these attacks.
So you don't think North Korea was alone in this?
Couldn't have been alone. You know, North Korea doesn't have an internet infrastructure. What it has is based in China, and North Korea's most elite cyber warriors are based in the Chinese city of Shenyang, and that means Beijing knows about this because these guys are in China permanently.
Okay, and Cedric, people pay a lot of money for cybersecurity. Can we keep the malware that is out there and the viruses away from ordinary Americans so that they don't suffer identity theft and all of the problems that a huge corporation like Sony is suffering?
Oh, I think Sony could have done a much better job at securing their internet, and I think Americans in general, people in general, have a way of getting at the best kind of cybersecurity protection mechanisms. The problem is nobody sells one product that can take care of all of that, and that's a weakness within the cybersecurity industry. But Americans can do things like change their passwords, they can encrypt their data, they can also look for better authentication mechanisms. The password is a very outmoded way of authentication, and that's one way that the North Koreans probably got into Sony, and that is something that needs to be changed, and it needs to be changed now.
All right. And Gordon, final question, very quickly, bigger picture, can our government be hacked?
It certainly has been hacked. You know, the Chinese stealth fighter, which they unveiled a month or so ago, well, that's our F-35. That's our technology in a Chinese airframe. Well, guess where they got it?
Oh, crazy. All right. Cedric Layton, Gordon Chang, thanks so much for being with us this evening.
You bet, Judge.
All right. And up next, Ambassador